You happen to be walking along the road, you see this amazing car, you think, oh, that looks really cool, got to take a shot of that. Or you're at some kind of vintage car rally or something like that, and you think, so you whip out your phone, you go, right, okay, so I try and take a photo of it, and you go click, and it's okay, it's a shot of a car, but it doesn't really convey what you were really feeling when you were looking at that car. Or maybe even you're just wanting to get a shot of a kind of car that you were wanting to show somebody else because that's exactly the model you were talking about. These phones are great. They're with us, they're all the time, we can take the shot, but it doesn't always give us what we want. So today's episode is all about how can we kind of get a better sense of photographing a car. That's what we're going to be talking about. So stick around. No, not that one. So yes, welcome to Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, episode 301. Yes, last week's was the big 300 episode. So today, photographing cars. Yep, this idea was suggested by Robert, so we're going to talk a little bit about this. Meanwhile, if you happen to be watching live, leave a comment. Let me know what you're up to, where you're based, where you're from, what the weather's doing, all the usual kind of bits and pieces. And even if you're not watching live, you can still leave a comment. You can chat. Yeah, I mean, obviously I can't chat back in real time if you're watching the recording, but you can still leave comments. Let me know your thoughts. Give you little bits of input into ideas as and when they crop up. And of course, if you do leave a comment, then it means that if anybody else is watching this in the future and they're looking at the comments, they can kind of get a sense of what your thoughts were too. So we can do that. And while you're at it, click the like, subscribe too if you want, but certainly click the like for the moment while we're going out live. Always helps the algorithms, and once it's past being live, helps the algorithms too. So there we are. Anyway, like I say, leave me a comment, and I can see we've got a few in already. So April says, greetings everyone from a sunny Long Island, New York. Janet says, hi from a sunny and warm Mississauga in Canada. Gunilla says, hi from a very grey Ireland. Yesterday was the hottest day this summer, and today is cold, 15 degrees Celsius. Yeah, here in Castle Douglas, southwest Scotland, also round about 15 degrees. Grey, overcast, damp, just looks like it could rain at any moment. I think there's all sorts of heat waves further down south and certainly across Europe. Not here in Scotland, that's for sure. Marcy says, good morning all from Winnipeg. Robert says, howdy all from what I can only believe is the afterlife and was not saved, Texas. Obviously rather warm and toasty there. Sitting outside in your garden, marshmallows on a stick, and you don't even have to light the barbecue. Yep. Right, Lisa says, good morning from a warm, rainy southern Maryland. And Roland joins us and says, hey everyone. Right, okay, so we have people, we have a topic. So let's flip that over there. Right, so get rid of all the bump around. And so what are we talking about? Today then is cars. So basically cars, this idea came from Robert. So last month through July, Robert accumulated the most Smug points through participation. It was a three-way tie. It was a close thing, but ultimately Robert contributed the most to these podcasts across the course of July. So he just pipped the other two at the post and he got to choose the topic. And Robert said, cars. I know Robert's a car enthusiast. He has a couple of different cars. In fact, I seem to remember that you had one version of a car where you had the two versions of the same car, a black one and a red one, the same make and model. I don't know whether that's still the case, Robert, but anyway, so that's what today's topic is about. So that's where the topic came from. So where are we going to start? Okay, first thing I'm going to do is just tidy up the desktop a little bit as per usual, just so that I can get a better sense of what's going on over here, and I can read the comments on this side and then display what's going over on the right there. Now I can, if I click over here, what I do is, so what we're going to do then, I'm going to start off with the notion. So cars, yeah. Now it is a tricky one, because I will say right at the outset, this is going to be more about a guideline to getting started with photographing cars. This isn't advanced car photography. Advanced car photography would involve aircraft hangars, lights, smoke machines, all that kind of stuff. And that's not really my thing. Okay, I've not had the chance to do this. And so because these podcasts are also based around photo, whatever topic we are, I basically use my own photos or photos that you, the viewers, have sent in. I don't randomly go off and grab photos from elsewhere on the web. Copyright, just sheer respect to anybody else using that photo without asking them, that kind of thing. Now, so what am I doing? I'm making excuses. I shouldn't be making excuses. The reason I'm making excuses, though, is here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with what I think is where we quite often start, our starting point. And I know this starting point because shortly after we moved to here in Castle Douglas, some 21 years ago. In fact, actually, I can find the date on that one exactly. Yes, it was August 28th, 2005. There you go. So almost exactly 21 years ago. We'd moved here. We'd been here a couple of months. I looked out the window and what did I see? A DB7. Sorry, a DB5. Oh my God. It's like the James Bond car. And it's like, oh, wow. How exciting is that? Now, this is in the days before I became a photographer, right? I'd just sold my web design business. We moved down here. In fact, I was going to be a writer. Photography wasn't, I had a little digital camera. I pulled out the camera, I ran outside and I went click. And I thought, that's such a cool car. And then I looked at the photo and yeah, it's the James Bond car, but it's the James Bond car on a street with other cars around it, and it's dull, overcast weather, and it's a photo of a car, but it's not an interesting photo of a car. But at that point, I wasn't trying to be a photographer. I just had a photo of a car. When I did start actually trying to become a bit of a photographer and I started learning about editing and all the rest of it, I played around with it and I sort of edited it up and I cropped in and I sort of faded the background a little bit and boosted the highlights and all the rest of it. And I managed to edit this. And this was about as best as I could get out of that previous photo. Okay, so it's edited up. It looks better than the previous raw photo, and it took me quite a long while into doing photography. I would periodically come back and look at this photo, but to understand where it had gone wrong. And quite apart from the fact that, yes, it's a dull overcast day. Yes, it's just an ordinary street. It's not easy to isolate. It isn't the Italian Alps. It isn't some Paris street or something like that. It's just High Street in Castle Douglas. A Scottish town, but it doesn't even look particularly Scottish. There's nothing really going for it in that way. But it wasn't just that. The real problem with this is the height. Okay, because basically I pulled out my camera. Well, let's see, camera. Except although it wasn't, it was a much smaller little bridge camera. But basically, I'm standing there in front of it and I pull my cap and I'm pointing down and I go click. Okay, and that pointing down, going click, is where the problem starts. Because the problem starts, basically, this is shot from eye height. More noticeable here, right? Eye height. And cars don't look their best from eye height. Now, this is me. I'm not particularly tall. I will say, I'm not quite dwarven. I'm about 5'6", but the road's sloping down. I'm a little bit further down it. So it does look like I'm squatting a bit, maybe. But the point is that I'm still looking down on the car at quite an angle. And cars don't look their best at that angle. So this is really where the starting point goes. Your very first starting point is how high should you be when you photograph the car? Now, you can have some fun. I'll show you some photos. You can get down to ground level. You maybe get below ground level. You can kind of be eye height with the window, eye height with the grille at the front. But this is really a starting point. If you find a car on the street or you're at some kind of, vintage car show or something going on, then the height is your first thought. Oh, now a couple of comments here. What have we got? Oh yeah, Robert said, I now own 5 vehicles. Wow. Okay, 3 sports cars, 2 90s NSX and 1 S2000. I'm a Honda fan. That's right. It was the NSX, Honda NSXs. You got one black one, one red one, I seem to remember. April says, I have a Honda Fit. Marcy says, I have a Honda lawnmower. Robert says, I had a Fit as well, a fun little car. He also says, for your information, I rented a Mini Cooper last week while on the road for your work. That car is ridiculously fun. I envy your Mini Cooper. Mine's not quite the Cooper. Mine's a Mini 1, which is like a grade or two down from that. Same shape, though. So a little bit. Oh, Sandra, Sandy's joined us from Alberta. Says good morning, everyone. Marcy says should be so high. Hendrix waves back. Right. Okay. Yes. Lol. Joke. Okay. Sometimes, Marcy, your jokes require a little bit more backstory to be able to get them straight away. However, I appreciate your humour. So anyway, where were we? Right. So, cars then. What I'm going to do is let's talk. So I've talked about the notion of height. So the very first thing that you do is, where are we? Let's go to here. There's a notion then. All right. So right. I will also say at this point, actually, that practically all the cars that I'm showing are probably going to be vintage cars, because that's the only time I'm likely to take my whip my phone out. Now, every now and again, once or twice a year, over in the car park across the road, I'll suddenly see there's a whole bunch of vintage cars there. So I go wandering across, take a few shots, start thinking, oh, well, that might do for Photo Crowd or Guru Shots or something like that. These are not photos which I'm promoting myself as a photographer to go out and buy the prints of or anything like that. This is just hobby enthusiast level, right? So here's a wonderful Jaguar XK150, I think. Lovely maroon colour, and it's just got lovely lines. Okay, so that notion of if you go side on, a lot of cars are designed for, or part of that design is that side on. Okay, and it's a lovely shape, and so the other problem that you often have as well is you'll have people moving around all over the place. Now, you might be able to Photoshop out a couple of them, or you might just get lucky. There's other cars in the car park here, but I've managed to just isolate this one. So you get a side view. Here's another one. This is a Morgan. This is, again, taken out on the street, different time of year. Just literally probably about 50, 60 yards straight up that way. And Morgan, another beautiful shape, much more modern car actually than the Jaguar, but it's designed to look as though it's got that kind of old sort of 40s style shape to it. And in this case, the sun's not out, but there's something interesting about the sky behind, the falling leaves, that kind of thing. So, first option when photographing the car is the idea of height level. Second is maybe, can you get into a side? Because like I say, so many cars are designed for how they look side on. Okay, but once you've got, and again, maybe from a pavement or sidewalk, there's only a limit to how far you can go back, or maybe you shoot across the road. It's a tricky one, but that shape, I think but notice whether with this one or with this one, actually my eye level is pretty much where the handle is on the door. Okay, door handle height. Same here, kind of door handle or bottom of the window height. And that's to get the best without kind of getting any real distortion. There's just to kind of translate that for a moment. If you're photographing a person, right, full length, so you're doing full length, you're getting head to toes, right? If you photograph them from eye level, so you're photographing them at head level straight on, their body will shrink down. Okay, they will be distorted. The proportions are not going to quite feel right because the head is going to be closer to the camera than the feet are. So the feet are going to look smaller. The legs it's going to shape down a little bit. Maybe not huge amounts, but a bit. Unless you're standing about, 20 yards away with a big zoom lens, you're going to notice a difference. So one of the things you should always do if you're photographing somebody at full height is actually chest level. Right, heart level, or even belly level. Belly's maybe a bit low, but certainly kind of mid-chest. And then that way, actually their head and their feet feel much more in proportion. So you're really shooting at about just above halfway, 2/3 of the way up. Now, similarly then, if we flip back to the cars, what I've done here is, even though I'm squatting down to take on the side, I'm still kind of shooting it about that just above halfway up. And then that helps keep the proportions right. Okay. Oh yeah. Oh, Marcy says, that is beautiful. Right. So now the next thing then is I'm going to talk about shooting from the front, because this is the other one. Because just as cars tend to be beautifully designed from the side, there's a lot of thought goes into what the cars look like from the front. So this is an old vintage Bentley. Now, some of you might remember this trick from before. In fact, actually, even if you don't, doesn't matter. Do you remember last week, for those of you who watched and tuned into episode 300, and there was a little bit of talk about the notion of how a phone distorts, you know, a wide angle lens rather distorts. And if you don't want the distortion, if you want to keep things in proportion for the way they are, then you need to be further back and zoom in. Because as you get closer and you go wide angle, the sides kind of, you know, shift, and the front shifts and everything else. And now I'm going to show you 3 photos of exactly the same Bentley, right? But using 3 different settings on this. So this setting here, this is the front of the Bentley, and it's kind of the proportions that it should be. And what I'm doing, I'm standing back a little bit, and I've got this on 2x zoom. Okay, now most of these car shots that I'm showing you are done with the phone, because I'm an opportunist when it comes to these things. So I stand back, 2x zoom, and that gives me more or less the proportions. I think if you saw it there, you will go okay. Now, the next thing I did was I took it off 2x zoom and I just had it on ×1, so 1:1, and I stepped closer. Okay? And notice what a difference that makes. Okay? So from standing back to 2x, now, it looks like a different car. It isn't, because you can see there's an original Mini, not the newer Mini Cooper that Robert was talking about hiring. This is the old original, you know, the really small Mini. On that side, there's an MGB over on that side. Looks like there's a Triumph here, another old car there. So if I click back here, there you go. There's the Mini, there's the MGB. All right, so it is the same car from the same angle. Check the number plate. Just I'm stepping closer and zooming in. And now it's almost starting to look like a hot rod. Then what I did was I've got a wide angle setting on this, which is 0.7. Okay. So now I go wide angle and I step in even closer, and it's this. And that looks even more hot rod. Okay. Great big wheel arches, big headlights, tiny little narrow body. Okay. And once again, you can see the Mini over here and the MG over here. Lots of people standing around as well. But from that to that, now that looks positively bulky and a lot less streamlined than it did when we first looked at it. So this really becomes really important. This is further away, 2x zoom. This is closer in, 1x. This is closer in, wide angle. So the proportions of the car from wing to tip to from the edge of the wheel arches is the same, but the whole shape of it is distorted quite considerably. Okay, so this becomes really important to understand what your phone is going to do, or if you're using your DSLR or mirrorless or whatever, if you've got a wide angle lens and you're getting in closer, as opposed to standing back with a zoom lens and, you know, zooming in. So now the thing is we can also kind of play that to our advantage. So on the street, again, now this one was taken about 100 yards that way, down on the high street. Again, another beautiful Jaguar, I think probably another XK 150, I think. Very little room to take the shot. There's literally another car just behind me. I'm squatting down, taking a shot of the front grille. And that same kind of wide angle effect is just boosting the wheel arches, giving it all really accentuating, exaggerating those curves. And it's kind of fun, you know. Oh yeah, April says cool shot. Yeah, and so, but it's not really the shape that you're You know, if you actually stood there, you wouldn't quite look like that. Like I say, so the wide angle is distorting it, but we're playing with that. There's that notion, as I keep kind of come back to, when you've got, whether it's a wide angle or any other thing going on, where, or, you know, something that's not quite representing the picture in the way that you want it to, you can either try and mitigate that, or you can lean into it. Okay, that's really, really, really important thing to understand with photography, right? Whatever lens you've got, whatever circumstances you've got, whatever your weather system, whatever it is, if you're standing there and going, you're either trying to mitigate it or you lean into it. And sometimes we can't mitigate it, so lean into it and go, well, okay, I can't stand back and get in all the room that I want. There's not an option here. So now what am I going to do? I'm going to lean into it. I'm going to say, well, okay, let's take the notion of the wide angle and let's really ramp it up and make an effect out of it. So it becomes a feature rather than a distraction. Okay, that, what I've just told you there, should be ticked there as one of like the top 10 most useful things you can ever know about photography. When you're learning photography, when you're trying to use photography, when you're out there in the field and you are snapping away and things aren't working, how can you mitigate the problem, or how can you lean into it? Okay, so let's go back to this. Now, the other thing you can do, so there's that notion then, we've talked about get your height right, we've talked about shooting from the side, talked about shooting from the front. The other thing, and this is really the classic one, no, actually, I'll tell you what, I'll come on to that. Let's show you a couple more fronts. Back at the car rally, here's another Mini. This is a Mini Clubman. Again, you can get down. You're going for the shapes. Or this one is a really nice kind of Austin Healey 3000. For some reason, Guru Shots, whenever they've got car grills or cars or whatever, this one usually scores pretty well. So that notion of getting down in front can really make a difference. Another thing is, you know, sometimes it can bulk out a little bit too much. So here's my Mini. And at this point, it just looks like this big blob. Okay, it's sort of big, round kind of size. Obviously, the Mini doesn't look like this. And whereas something like this, I think looks really cool, this, I think, just isn't really working. Okay, I'm parked up in a woodland somewhere and I just thought, I mean, I like the reflections in the window. Don't get me wrong, that lovely reflections of trees. But, you know, that wasn't really working for it. Oh, April says your car's very cute and I like the colour. Volcanic Orange. That's the official title for this paint job, is a volcanic orange. And also, being bright orange, it does make it a lot easier to find in the car park when you come out of the supermarket and you can't remember where you've parked. Unless you've got a couple of SUVs or big trucks or whatever parked next to it, in which case you can never find the thing. However, tangents. More fun is, well, okay, another little trick to understand. Right, so here's a lovely VW Beetle. Different shade of orange to my Mini. But there's something not quite right about this. And here's another little hot trick to understand about when photographing cars with your phone, is we get out our phone and very often we're photographing directly onto it, right? So I'm standing in the middle. I've got my eye straight on, in this case, the handle of the bonnet, hood, whatever you would call it. Remembering that with Volkswagen Beetles, the engine is actually in the back, the front bit's your storage space. So I'm standing right in front of this, right in the middle here. Now, just as in the middle of your screen here, you can see my phone, except where's the lenses? The lens isn't in the middle. The lens is to one side. It's designed to be that way. So if you've turned so actually this is offset. It's not shooting in the middle. It's shooting from slightly to one side. And if you look at this, you notice there's a little bit of the handle just kind of showing on the left here. And this bit slopes up a little bit and that bit slopes down a little bit. And it's not quite middle. Okay? And this is a really important point. Is that when you're doing your phone, you don't do your phone like that. You have to do that. Okay, you've got to make sure that the lens is smack bang in the middle, because otherwise it's just going to be slightly off and it's just not going to quite look right. Much like when I talk about when you know, having a tilted horizon. If you're going to go for a proper tilted horizon, go for a proper tilted horizon, right? It's got to be 15 degrees, 20 degrees or more, and then you know it's supposed to be a tilted horizon. But a horizon that's just 2 degrees out, 1 degree out, 3 degrees, it doesn't look like a proper statement. It looks like you just weren't taking care. So similarly with this, you've got to make sure that that you've got the camera lens smack bang in the middle if you're going for that symmetrical look. Oh, Meg's joined us and says hi. Marcy says orange is such a great colour. Lisa says your Mini looks happy and this Beetle looks depressed. And Rhoda says lots of pareidolia vibes coming through. Yes, well, we did pareidolia a couple of months back, didn't we? And a lot of cars are designed specifically to have that notion of a face as such, because we then kind of relate to it a little bit more. So fun one here, Cadillac Eldorado. So I was on a drive somewhere, pulled over at a service station, and in the car park was this beautiful, great big old Cadillac. Now, I get down with the phone at the front. Obviously it's highly exaggerated because again, close in, wide angle, and you just get this incredible it's all about shapes. So I'm leaning into it. Now, so far then, what we've talked about is we've talked about getting the height right, we've talked about shooting from the side, and we've talked about shooting from the front. And we've talked about the notion of making sure that if you are shooting from the front and you're trying to get that symmetry, that you make sure that the camera or the lens of the camera, especially if it's on your phone, is actually over the middle bit and not accidentally to one side. Now, the next thing is really where you will find most car shots from, which is diagonal. Okay, so what you tend to be for this is a kind of 30 to 45 degrees. Okay, so you're really kind of situating yourself just off the front headlamp. Okay, and this kind of diagonal, and again, can work really well with the wide angle lens, because it kind of really it stretches out those lines. We get that notion of almost like the disappearing lines into the distance there. Those lines that are heading off down that way. There's a distant point over far on the left here, or shooting off down this way where the lines were sort of, so just like when you're doing in school doing art, or you were doing graphic design or something like that, perspective lines, and you draw, you've got a horizon line, you put a point on the horizon and you draw the lines down, and that's what allows it. And this kind of does that. Okay, now I will say with this, however, that I have messed around with clearing out all the naff stuff in the background. So that's the original photo. Okay, so you can go back and you can edit. I mean, here I am, got this, whoa, look at this Cadillac Eldorado, except for the fact there's this bright red car in the background, there's a white car behind that, there's a black van parked over there, and everything else. So basically I get in and I, completely re-edit it in order to try to create something a little bit more fun and fantastic. Really boost the colours and so a little bit of fun anyway. So bear in mind then that you can always go in and edit, and sometimes the editing, because really what it's about, you're trying to isolate the car. You don't want to be distracted too much by other people walking about or some other car that you're not interested in, especially if it happens to be bright red. The eye just gets drawn to the bright red car behind. Okay, we've talked before, I've done a whole podcast specifically on the colour red. Red is one of these that grabs all the attention. So your eye gets drawn to the red and you actually miss, especially when it's a brown car and the sun's just kind of set and the light is going. You miss the very thing that you're actually trying to photograph. Okay, another example then is to go back to that Bentley. So this is the Bentley that had, now, as you can see, I've also cleared out a few other bits and pieces from this one as well. But this is the same Bentley then that was this one. Okay. And then Now, obviously, I couldn't get quite as close. I managed to come back a little bit later and find that a lot of the other cars had gone, so I didn't have to do so much tidying up. But just as it's this same car here, and now, but again, that sort of down low, and from that kind of front wheel, front headlight perspective, is giving you just these beautiful lines coming off it. And so this does tend to be what you would call a kind of almost classic angle for photographing a lot of cars. It's showing off the beautiful lines and the shapes of the side, which the car designers have spent a lot of time on, and it's showing you what's going on in the front headlight, the front grille and headlights, which also the car designers have spent a long time doing. April says, love the colour of the Bentley. Yeah, quite an amazing colour, that one, the blues. That Jaguar the white Jaguar that I photographed on the street, where are we? Yeah, so here's the same one. So maybe I should have had them next to each other, but basically that one is this one. Okay, so at this point here, again, I'm squatting down on the pavement and just getting low and trying, and again, the wide angle is just accentuating that kind of wonderful kind of wheel arch and then the curves as it disappears down. So it becomes almost like a kind of cartoon version of a car. It's an exaggerated, it's taking those beautiful curves and it's exaggerating them. But this works, I mean, I showed you the orange Beetle earlier. Here's one I found. This is from a few years further back. Rusty old Beetle in a car park. Autumn leaves around it, and actually with the autumn leaves, the pockets of rust, the fading paintwork. Actually, the sort of season around it seemed to echo and fit with the car, kind of like a faded past its best kind of thing. But again, you can see that with that Beetle. I mean, again, the Beetle amazingly looks from the side. We've already had the cute look from the front. But when you're down there at the wheel arch level, that's where you're really kind of getting the interesting bit. Now, so far, this has been... Oh no, there's another angle. Yeah, so far what we've been talking about is vintage cars, because that's what's growing. Month or two back, can't remember exactly, over in the car park, some vintage cars, but then there were a couple of other fancier cars as well. And in fact, there was a Lamborghini. It's like, wow, you just don't see those in Castle. I mean, when I say Castle Douglas, you have to understand Castle Douglas is a rural Scottish village, southwest Scotland. It has a population of about 3,000 people. I don't know what the population is of where you happen to live, but here, we're at 3,000 isn't very big, right? It is a town. It's not a village. It's a town. But, basically, you don't tend to see Lamborghinis. So, in the car park, whoa, look at that, Lamborghini. And so, again, you get out. Now, these are unedited. You just get out the phone and I go, well, okay, I take that. I'm trying to kind of get a bit of an angle. Maybe if I go lower, that looks quite fun. And it helps kind of... The problem is with this one is we're very aware of the people standing around behind it. Get a bit lower. Now there's only really a little bit of a head, and that will be much easier to clean out in Photoshop. You can copy a bit of sky very easily on that. So you could do that. Or another one as well is the notion of from kind of behind. Certain cars, and something like the Lamborghini, in fact, actually, from the front, it's got all these beautiful shapes and that kind of almost aggressive diagonal. And from the back, it practically looks like it's speeding along the road, even though it's parked still. So now that wide angle slight distortion that you get with the phone and getting down at this angle is really kind of creating that kind of shape. It now looks like it's all big and beefy at the back, moving down to a small kind of shape at the front. Okay, so that's kind of another one where you can have a bit of fun. Is not just from the front wheel arch, but from the back wheel arch as well. But again, it's still diagonal. So kind of 30 to 45 degrees, move backwards and forwards, take a couple of different test shots, see what it looks like in the phone. Because again, the other important thing here is it's never necessarily about what the car actually looks like. It's what the car looks like as a photo. And it's the as a photo bit. That's the point. You've got a camera, or you've got your phone. You're using the camera on your phone. You're creating a photo. The photo is 2 dimensions, not 4 dimensions. You're not seeing it through time. You're seeing it at a flat surface. You're trying to create the illusion of depth on a flat surface. And neither are you picking up the sounds, the smells, the feeling of the breeze on your face, all the noises, all the excitement. None of the rest of it goes with it. Okay, so what it is what does it look like as a photo? So squat, move around, left, right, up a bit, down a bit, until something makes you go, ooh. Okay, that's really what you're trying to do. Then what you could do, I mean, from here, there's also the full-on back. To go back to that first Jaguar that I showed you, the maroon one here, we had the side, and now here's what it looks like from behind. Sometimes cars can look quite interesting. Sometimes car manufacturers, you do tend to feel like they spent so much time on the front and the side that they kind of forgot about the back, and the back just goes, yeah. Jaguars, though, can be quite interesting. Again, you've got those curves going round. It's quite a different feel to it. But then there's that notion of shooting from the back. But then you what if you kind of almost go through the window? And so here, where there's a top missing, it's a topless? No. There's no word. What's the word? Car where the roof comes down. Cabriolet? This doesn't feel right for that. Anyway, you know what I mean. So another old vintage car. And we can really see not a lot on the dashboard. Not a lot on the foot pedals down there. You're missing a lot of mod cons here. There's no stereo. There's no sat nav. And in fact, that there is the horn. But there's something quite interesting. So now we're kind of just leaning into it. Or here's another vintage one as well, where the roof off, convertible, Janet and Roland. Yes, thank you, convertible. That's the very word I was looking for. I think sometimes there is something interesting about the notion of, where you're actually able to sort of lean in, look through the car. So we've got, this is what it's like if this had back seats and I was sitting in the back seat. Maybe it does have back seat. Anyway, I'm kind of leaning forward over the back of the car. And now we do have dashboard, but we can also see through the window, which then kind of brings me on to the next bit, which is that notion of actually looking through the window, because there's from the inside looking out. And sometimes you can create interesting photos from that. So here we are now, my Mini again, but inside the Mini. So that shot that we had earlier of, where are we? This one in the woodland. So this one's in the same woodland, but actually now sitting on sitting inside the car, looking out. So again, I'm just in the car, and then I kind of lean right back, and kind of essentially try and line it up so that I'm kind of trying to go for a bit of symmetry. Part of the fun bit about the Mini is the design. There's a lot of design on the inside, and it goes for all these circles. And so you have this sort of central console, which is a circle, and you have the speedometer, which is a circle. Even your air vents over in the corners are done very circular. And then it's got this kind of rounded quality to it. But that notion then, maybe try and get a bit of a, the steering wheel in, get that shape of and we're also getting the rear view mirror. What's it like then just looking through the window? So when you're doing car photography, that notion of what it's like from the inside looking out can be interesting. Now, it's no good having inside looking out if it's literally looking out of the window, because then you're not seeing anything of the car. What you've got to be thinking about is, what's the story? What is it you're trying to tell? Another fun little series I did with a phone was when I went through a car wash. So in this case, you get a diptych, it's 2 photos, a triptych is 3 photos. What's this, a quad-ticked? Something like that. Somebody else can look it up. Anyway, 1, 2, 3, 4 photos. So I took a bunch of photos going through the car wash, and basically, so we start off again. What we've got the inside here, and you can see it's starting to come towards the window. Then we've got the brushes are now hitting the window, then it's kind of really going full, got all the noise going, and then it's starting to kind of run up over the top of the window. So that could be a fun little thing as well, is this notion of taking a bunch of photos and kind of squeezing them together. Right, okay, so let's take a little pause for a minute. Hopefully then that's starting to give you an idea of cars. So this notion of the car as a car isolator. I'm going to come on to some more ideas of thinking about cars in a moment. But basically what we've started off thinking about is when you're photographing the car, the very first thing you've got to think about is what height you're shooting it from. Because generally speaking, normal standing up eye level doesn't really work. You're just not going to get any kind of real excitement out of it. Then have a think about, do you want to photograph from the side? What is it about the side, the shape of it? Do you want to photograph from the front? That notion of the distance you're photographing it from, the wide angle versus the step back and zoomed in. We talked about the notion of then shooting from just that 45-degree angle from the front, near the front, between the front wing and the front headlight, just kind of getting those lines that are shooting off in both directions, or even from the back. Then we talked about the shape of their back straight on, in the same way we might shoot from the front straight on. And then there's a notion of kind of almost looking through the back window from the inside of the car and then looking out. What's Robert said? A quadriptych, as opposed to a quadtych. I'll take your word. I'm assuming you just quickly looked it up, or you already knew it. Maybe that's a terrible assumption that you should have had to have looked it up. I am only making that assumption because I would have had to look it up. But I'm trying to do the podcast. You lot have access to Google. So, okay, it's a quadriptych. That'll do. Although oddly, is it a quadrip? Oh no, it's a driptych and not a quadiptych. Okay. April says, how about black and white or monochrome? Absolutely. Yeah, I haven't gone. I mean, again, yes, you can. I suppose if you are going for black and white, then it really is thinking about the notion of, it's then about line and tone. Obviously, the colour then isn't playing any kind of part on it. So, yeah, that can be an important, play around with black and white. Basically, if you've got the colour, always take the photo in colour, because as we've talked about before, there are half a dozen different ways you can convert to black and white. Each of them will give you different options. Whereas if you take the photo in black and white, you can't go back and reverse it afterwards unless you've also got the original raw file. So take the photo in colour and then drop it into black and white, play with it, play with the contrast, play with the colour balance, so different four ways of doing black and white. Okay, let's do this then. Let me just show you basically what I mean by that. So if I take, let's go to here, right? Let's take this Bentley. Now, let's go to making it into black and white. And what I'll do, I'll just duplicate that layer and go filter, camera raw filter, just because it's got the quickest monochrome. Now I can go black and white and it's done black and white and it's okay, but what's happened here is this light blue, this really lovely vivid light blue has now the same tone as the tarmac, and we've kind of lost something with that. So if we go to the black and white mixer down here, and look now, there's no red in this, so that's not going to make any difference. Likewise with the orange, the yellow will affect the trees in the background here. The yellow and now actually I quite like, if we go over here, it kind of gives those trees a little bit more texture, so I'll maybe boost the yellows here. Greens also affecting it, but I'll leave that there. Aqua, okay, aqua's not really touching it. Blue, oh look at that. So it's affecting the sky and it's really affecting that pale blue bit in the middle. Okay, purple, tiny little bit there, and magenta, nothing happening. So basically everything's happening in the blue, and key point about this is, what do you want to do with it? Now I can drop that blue so dark that now we've lost that two-tone effect. This just looks like a black car. But if I take that blue and I move it over here and make it basically white, now we've really got that two-tone effect. But because it's not about colour, it's about tonal contrast. And from this, we could then, if we want, we could go to effects. We could maybe boost the clarity a little bit more. I don't know whether we really need to. Contrast. Boost the contrast a little bit more if you wanted, something like that. So if you're going to go black and white, that's what you do. Okay, make sure that you have control over which sliders you can move around, because you can see just how much difference that makes, as opposed to when we just did the auto black and white. Like I click here and I go, where are we? Black and white. It just, that mid-range blue just becomes grey. Whereas we can make it like this. Okay, so little side tangent there, but so hopefully then April, that gives you a bit of an idea of that. Right, okay, so where are we? The Smug Points. Give you a Smug Points update. Yes, that's what I wanted to do. So Smug Points leaderboard, as we know, Robert won January, but now the last week's 300th episode special, what I did was I said everybody who actually asked me a question got a bonus 15 Smug Points. Okay, so last week's was Ask the Photographer, all sorts of interesting questions, lots of stuff to go back and play with and listen to again if you want. So where we are now is currently Gunilla is on 50 Smug Points. So she's just out there on the front. Anton is on 40. And then Susan, Robert, Sandy, Roland and Marcy are all on 25 Smug Points each. So still plenty to play for, because next week will be a feedback session. So remember, if you send an image in for feedback, you get 25 Smug Points, bonus 25 Smug Points if I use your image for one of the feedback sessions. So that can bump you up. And then 2 weeks after this one, I'm talking about cars. Of course, there's going to be a cars challenge. I'll talk a bit more about that at the end of the podcast, so stick around for that. So, whilst at the moment Gunilla might be out there in front, there's still plenty to play for, plenty of opportunities for everybody to kind of leap ahead. Right, okay. Also, just a quick little reminder that if you find these podcasts useful, interesting, entertaining, then buy me a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/Kim Ayres is one of the ways you can support these podcasts. Right, okay. And of course, invite your friends. If you know other people, now you can send them a straightforward invite. Look, hey, this is going to be about this, especially if there's a topic. Oh, I tell you, here's another one you can do, right? If you're chatting to another person who's a photographer, and they go, oh, you know what, I keep wondering about, and they talk about a particular aspect of photography, and you go, oh, I'm fairly certain Kim covered that one. Go to the playlist, scroll back through, or do a little Google search, Understanding Photography with Kim Ayres, selective colour, tilt shift, colour red, shadows, diagonals, rain, I can't remember, whatever else we've done, right? And there's a podcast where we've covered this. And if there is a topic we haven't, then make the suggestion. But there's a massive resource. I mean, this is episode 301. We were talking last week about the fact 300 episodes. There's loads and loads of information sitting in these. So even if there's people, if you've got these people, even if they don't want to come and sit and watch live, even if, 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, UK time, isn't convenient for them, it is a massive resource here that people can go and tap into. And if you're chatting to anybody in your camera club, friend who takes photos, and they're struggling a little bit with something, point them to the podcast archives, okay? Loads of information there, and then you get to be the helpful person who's helped them find a solution to something, okay? So, worth keeping that one in mind. Right, okay. Now, where were we? Okay, so we've been talking about that notion of different ways of photographing the car. The other thing is really, one of the things that I suppose runs through all of this is story. We're using it in particular with that notion of how can I make the car look interesting? What's the kind of story of the car? What are the interesting bits about the car? What are the bits of the car that I think, oh, that's cool, I want to show somebody else that? How can I use the wide angle lens or the lighting to make the car look interesting or exaggerate a particular aspect of it? So what is it that's grabbing my attention? Now, the other thing is to go with the idea of people, right? Now, cars and people usually go together. Now, at these vintage car rallies, usually people are getting in the way, okay? So people are sort of standing there, you know, right where you don't want them to be, ruining the wonderful lines and colours of the car that you're trying to get. But the other idea is to, what do you do? What about if you kind of, well, either lean into it or make a story, go cinematic. You know, cars and cinema, you know, huge history together. Cars, as we know them, have been around basically about the same amount of time as cinema, you know, give or take a decade. So they've always featured. Now, that idea of looking out through the front window, here's one I did just messing around one night when it was a foggy night. And essentially, in order for this one, I had the boot open at the back. I put my camera on the parcel shelf at the back of the Mini, set a 10-second timer, and then ran round to the front of the car. So I've got headlights. I'm just on a little back street. I've got headlights on, and you can see me faces lit by the headlights. You can also see a little bit of a smear here as I kind of moved into position just as it was going click. But also interestingly, when you're inside, looking on the inside of the car, so remember like those shots of like the car wash, like inside the car wash, or looking out at the forest. Here's, you know, that inside looking out is interesting, but here at night time, the dash is all lit up as well. So we can see, you know, the speedometer here. We can see, what have I got on? Radio 1, 99.7 FM. Other little bits like, you know, the heater and the fan and what have you. So, and actually over on the right here, there's a reflection in the window of the lit up dash. So that kind of becomes a little bit atmospheric as well. I'll show you a couple more photos I did. Now, some of you may remember, those who watched far enough back, a set of photos I did for Vintage Clothing Company where we had a wonderful old Citroen DS to play around with and a couple of models. And here we set up a shot from the inside looking out. And this one, going for that cinematic thing, we've lined it up so that her eyes are being reflected in the rear view mirror, that there's a look going on between them. We've got this wonderful old dashboard. There's a real sense of, you know, the crinkled old leather and the you know, you can almost sort of smell the kind of old petrol and old leather in it. So you can start playing around with these things. I mean, another one, this was primarily a fashion shoot, so we're going for this shot, you know, this through the door, looking at Eva sitting in here. Now, part of the thing about this was there happened to be the cherry blossom out. It was a springtime shot, and so we moved for this particular shot. We moved the car round so that it was sitting underneath the cherry blossom. So we've got the cherry blossom there, and then that's echoing nicely into the kind of purples and pinks and what have you on her dress as well. So here we're using the car, we've opened the door, we're using the car to kind of create a shape and a frame around. Now we also did, now some of you may remember, I did one of my favourite shots, I still love this shot that I did where, so this has got very much road movie feel to it. Now I'm shooting on that. Now for this one, I've got somebody with an off-camera flash standing over to the left, pointing it inwards. There's a little orange gel across the front of the flash, and that's lighting them up and making it look like they're driving into the sunset. Now this was just in a fairly dull car park, so in the editing process also I did a movement blur into the window so it looks like they're driving along. So if this was to be taken straight out of the camera, I would have had to be lying on the bonnet while they were driving, and then while she's not actually looking at the road but is in conversation or exchanging a glance with the girl in the background. Emily. So But this notion then, we've got the car, but the car is one part of a bigger set of stories. What is it? Marcy says the Citroen steering wheels are something else. Yeah, that's true. April says, yes, I really enjoy this series of photos. But this was also done as a fashion shoot. And, you know, part of the fashion shoot here, where, again, what we're doing, we're using the front of the car and then we're lining up the models with the car so that the car is becoming a feature. But it's really kind of, the car is really, it's a supporting prop to the models, to the fashion, to the story, as opposed to necessarily it being about the car. It's more about the people, and then the car is a feature of it. So, but for me, that, to be honest, for me, that's more fun. But then that's because I'm a people photographer. But another thing we did was, you know, so here we're using, again, the same models, but now they're both out. And then we're using the lovely, lovely line of the Citroen DS and that shape there. And then here we've actually created like a story scene. So now we've got, you know, Eva sitting in the car, like she's waiting while Emily's trying to sort of fix it so that they can get going again. So you can have that kind of fun with it. Oh, Sandy has put, you have the greatest ideas, Kim. I'm thinking these would be great for those who hate doing self-portraits and just have some fun with it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a huge part of what I actually do and what my main photography is about creating scenes that are theatrical, dramatic, cinematic, artistic, where people get to be the hero, heroine, villain of their own epic images. For me, that's just so much fun, and an awful lot more fun than some kind of slightly awkward portrait where you're just feeling a bit uncomfortable being in front of the camera. Why not dress up? Why not get some interesting props? Why not go to some amazing location or make something grungy out of some really decaying environment? That's where the real fun is for me. Roller says, I had a Citroen DS many years ago, went up in flames. Not so good. I think a lot of us have car stories. You've had a burnt out car. I managed to drown a Mini once. Tell you that about another day. Right, so another idea of some of you may have, did I do one on this? I think I did a podcast on this. I can't remember now. But this one was done for the Wave Blues Band. And so the Wave Blues Band, so we've got a friend who's got an American car, convertible American car. Glad you used the word convertible. Reminded me. But the roof wouldn't go back up. The motor was broken on that. And on the day we were going to do the shoot, it was chucking it down with rain. So in that notion of, can you mitigate or do you lean into it? The car couldn't leave the garage, so we leant into it. We decided to set it up as though the band is there all ready to go. They're all in the car, but they're in the garage. And we set up the lighting, but actually allowed the lights to be in it. So quite a big shift from what the original photo was going to look like. But leaning into it, we decided to make essentially a photo set out of the garage and put all the lights there and put the band into it. And then played around with the number plate, so it sort of looks like Wave Blues, because this is the Wave Blues Band. So you can kind of play around with, so what's Marcy saying, in the 002 picture, the half flat tyre distracted me. Is it flat? I don't think it's flat. I think it is. I think it's maybe a fairly low pressure. I do think he needed to pump them up a little bit, but not completely flat. Right, now, so that notion then that we've looked at cars, we looked at how you can include people in cars. Another thing then is the notion of car details. Okay, sometimes you're not trying to get the whole car, you're trying to get a bit of the car. What bit of the car is going to be interesting? So, not that one, that one. So in this case, again, across the road, vintage cars, lovely old vintage Porsche. And here, I've got other shots, of course I have, where I stepped back further and zoomed in the same way that I did with that Bentley. But there's something lovely about just this curve that comes round here, and these wonderful leather straps along with the Porsche stamp logo thing there and the writing. So this really then is about creating a shape and creating a mood. So you're getting a hint of it. So that notion of details within the picture, within the car. Sometimes certain cars have mascots, like, like the Bentley here. So actually this is that same big blue Bentley. But what I did here was I started to come in to get the winged Bentley mascot, and actually I realised I really like the selfie aspect of this in the reflection. You can see, and because everything's exaggerated because of the curve of the metal in it, you get this really weird shape. I mean, my fingers, the size of my fingers compared to the little bit of head coming out and the way my feet kind of come down is so exaggerated. There's something kind of fun about that. There's somebody off over the side here looking like they're bending backwards. I mean, it's very cartoonish. So actually that became a little bit of fun with it as well. But yeah, other bits of mascots. There's a lovely old car called an Alvis. They haven't been made since the 40s, I don't think. But every couple of years, they would have one kind of mascot, and then they changed that mascot. So in this case, they had an eagle. A couple of years later, they had a hare as a mascot as well. So this was taken at a different point in time. So sometimes just kind of zeroing in on the mascot. But you've got to be careful that it's not just the mascot. You've still got to get a sense of the car. If we're talking about car photography, then you do have to know that it is attached to a car. But you've also got to make sure that it is kind of worth doing. I mean, that Lamborghini, that yellow Lamborghini, I put that up. So we get it up. Here's the logo. You go, oh wow, no, but so what? It's a picture of a Lamborghini logo on the front and some splattered flies or insects or something on it. Needs a bit of a wash. Devoid of a context. Actually, this in itself isn't that interesting. Now, sometimes what you can do as well, to go back to what a triptych is, to put a bunch of details together. So when we talked last year, I think it was, we talked about triptychs, and I think I did a triptych challenge as well. But that notion of triptych, whereby you can have the car and then you can have a couple of details with it. And when you take something like this, so we've got that Bentley here, but then we've also got an inside and that lovely kind of walnut dashboard here and the blue leather, and then we've got that the mascot bit on the front, but also that interesting little bit on the front grille, the reflection. And so at this point then, what we're doing is we're creating this triptych, we're creating a kind of full little narrative of showing that there's much more. It's not just one picture, we've got a story put together by 3 pictures. So sometimes, depending on what you want to do, to get the whole story, you want to have more than one picture to play with. So now we're into this idea of the kind of story of the car as such. Now you can play around with that context sometimes. So this one was in Morocco, up through the Atlas Mountains, got right to the point whereby they've given up on the tarmac. Then the roads aren't even tarmac to this point. We pulled out to get a shot of something, and this van just goes past, and it's got all these cushions and mattresses tied to the front. And there's just something about, I really quite like this sort of the dirt road, barely, a couple of little trees there, snow up on the mountains. You really get the feeling, well, okay, this is not Castle Douglas in Scotland. You are definitely off in a different country, in a different part of the world with this. Can you create something interesting with this? A diptych, we've done quadriptych and a triptych. A diptych, this one, I was looking for car photos. Here's my Mini again. What was funny about this was we had a wind where there was this night where there was just like howling winds, really high winds and storms and all the rest of it. It would have been in October or something. And I came out and all the leaves had decided that they would just gather around my car. So you can see here that, look, all the way along the rest of it, there's just a handful of leaves. And then they just all decided to build up right outside my Mini. Okay. Close-up shot, and then pull back to get the full sense of the street shot there. So in this case here, now, okay, I'm not bothering about getting down or anything. This was a very quick snap because it was the leaves that I was interested in. But it's that notion of a car in a context. How are you wanting to play with that? Another car photo was used to play around with was In fact, actually, I think, is that possibly the same orange Mini that we photographed before? Maybe. There was a car parade. It was, you know, the parade, the town parade, a bunch of vintage cars driving past on that. And then you're kind of, so you're getting all the cars. And then you've got the crowd and you've got the street and everything else. Some of you may remember when we were doing a tilt shift, we did a tilt shift stuff, where what you do is you blur the top and the bottom, and suddenly it looks like Toy Town. And now it looks like there's a little toy car going on with little toy people standing around as well. Anyway, that's slightly less interest, but kind of a little bit of a tangent. But you can also go, I mean, if I, you know, this was again a quick shot taken out at Lindisfarne. Now this is a tidal road, and tide was out. But what happens is this road does get covered twice a day as the tide comes in and out, and cars can sometimes get, you know, you can get stranded, get, you know, flooded, all this kind of stuff. And we just went down, and I quite like this. Now again, dull, overcast day, not really sure what to do, not a lot I can do with it, but there's something about be low level. You can see the water here where the sea's going to be starting to come in, seaweed all sitting around. And I'm just squatting down. So actually these cars here, 2 cars, and then there's a camper van, they were just kind of, there's a constant flow of traffic moving across. But I'm actually sort of slightly below ground level. There's almost something, not post-apocalyptic, almost pre-apocalyptic about this. I don't know. There's a mood in there somewhere. I haven't really managed to pull it out of the photo in the way that I want, but there's a mood there that I want to try and recapture at some point. What else have we got? There's the notion of car trails, light trails. If you've got it on a long enough shutter speed, you don't even see the car. In this case, you know, there's a tiny bit of blur here, but you know, what was this? This was something like a 2-second exposure or something, and in that 2 seconds this car's disappeared, this car's disappeared, this car's, you could just about see it because it's slowed down to turn around, this car's gone past. So there's that notion, but you do have to be careful that if it's a car challenge, you do need to know it's a car and not just a streak of light. But I'm just showing you this as something to kind of consider. Some of you may remember this from a reflections challenge I think we talked about, where, you know, the incredible clouds in the sky got it reflecting off the side of the window here, but you've got the reflection, but you can also sort of see through and you can make out the steering wheel. So we're using the car to reflect the sky as well. Then there's the notion of decay, burnt out car, you know, burnt out car in an old ruined building, in a burnt out building. So the car doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, all doing well. I mean, find an old car in a barn with chickens in it and a couple of wheels missing. You know, there's plenty of places where you can go, or you can get into the detail here with the burnt out. I mean, it's quite amazing what I've said. All this car is burnt out, all the rust, but there's a little bit of red paint just left on the left edge of the door there. You go, how on earth did that survive? You know, when everything, the rest of the door, everything else is just burnt to pieces. How does a little bit like that survive? Anyway, it did. So really then, that's kind of where we're at with the cars. The point then is to kind of sum up. If you're photographing the car, first of all, height. What height are you going to be? Because eye level, standing up, usually is one of the most uninteresting places to be. Do you want to photograph the car from the side, from the front, from the back, from that 45-degree angle? If you're using a wide angle lens, you want to lean into that to accentuate the notion of shapes and curves. There's a notion of looking through the back window or being on the inside, looking out of the car. What can you see? Is there something interesting? Are there people in there? Are we going to lean into the idea of story? How people are interacting with the cars? Shame Andy isn't here today. But some of you may have said, Andy's got an amazing series of photos that he started doing, which is about British people with American cars, usually older men, retired men, who they've always loved American cars, so they've got American cars, and it's about the guy and the car that he's in. And it's a really beautiful series of photos that he's done. So that story of people with their cars. There's that notion of details of cars. There's that notion of cars in a context. And so there's lots of different ways you can go about it. What have we got here? Lisa says a burned out car could work well with a bit of HDR. Robert says, one question about polarisation. Painted panels and windows often throw light differently than other elements of the car. How do you deal with that? Well, basically, it's one of those. The thing about polarising, if you're using a polarising filter, it won't affect reflecting metal. A hard surface that's reflecting isn't going to make any difference. What a polarising filter does is allow you to, it affects the reflections on glass or water. So something that's semi-transparent, where the light's bouncing off the window and you can't see it. You adjust your polarising filter and then suddenly you can see through, so you can see through the window, through the glass or through the water in a way that you couldn't because the reflections were bouncing on it. So yeah, sometimes a polarising filter can help if you're getting reflections in the wrong place. Hope that works. I mean, another thing to play around with here as well. Now, I suppose really what we're talking about is, like I say, the cars I've shown you aren't the kind of car photography as in full-on dramatic, theatrical car. I mean, car stories where I've got models and I've got people and I'm creating that kind of thing where the car is more of a prop, then yes, that's part of what I do. But cars which, as in like the car really is the focus, like these big, like kind of advertising things. I don't have shots like that. Now, what would I recommend for something like that? You see, if I was kind of commissioned to take a photo of a car, what I'd probably do is I'd go nighttime. If I couldn't get hold of a big hangar or something like that, I'd go nighttime. I would go, and maybe after it's been raining and you go find a remote car park, tarmac is wet, set up some lights with coloured gels on them, get some lights flashing, bouncing off the paintwork, bouncing off and smoke. Maybe you've got the car engine running, so the exhaust fumes are going, or maybe you're using smoke bombs. Smoke, light, colour, night, reflections. Right? That's how you then make a more dramatic kind of image. Just to kind of show you what I mean briefly. So if we take something like this. Now, taken on a dull day, not a lot going on with it. Limited, all these other people. Now, not that I'm going, I don't recommend using AI to create photos, but what I'm doing here is using the AI to demonstrate what I would really mean. So if what we do is I'm going to go to select subject, and because this is bright yellow, should kind of do it reasonably well. Yeah, that's not bad. That's really quite good. That's selected quite nicely. Just to kind of get a little bit more out of it, maybe I'll just select a little bit of shadowed car park tarmac there as well. So now what I'm going to do is copy that, paste that onto a separate layer. It's taken a little bit of something here, so let's just remove that. Okay. So next thing I want to do is let's create a bigger image. And so like if I really want this to fit into some kind of scene. So now we've got the car, rule of thirds, something like that. So now what am I going to do? Okay, so let's now go back to select subject. And now that's selected, we'll go to select inverse. Now I've got inverse, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the generative fill. What would you like to put in there? Now there's a couple of different options you can go for. So let's say I'll just copy this back into here, and I've got nighttime wet city street with neon light reflections. So let's see what this would look like if it was nighttime city scene. Generative fill doesn't always do what you want. It's always a bit of a gamble, see what it's going to come up with, but let's see what it does. Okay, and you can instantly see that this maybe starts to look slightly more interesting. Okay, so we've got these different kind of ways of pictures that are going on. I will say at this point though, part of the problem is the picture itself, the car itself is looking a bit dull because it was taken in a dull light. So what we could also do is, before we do anything else to it, let's go back here, let's get a bit of no, not hue saturation. Let's go for vibrance. I think, where are we? Color and vibrance. So let's really whack up the vibrance. Let's turn that blue a bit more yellowy. Let's go for a little bit of brightness and contrast. Let's brighten it up a little bit. Let's go back. Let's do another color and vibrance. And what I will do is we'll boost the vibrance again. And what I will do, I'll give it a very slight purple tint, I think, just kind of really. And so now we're kind of really boosting, exaggerating those colors. Okay. And do I need to do a little bit of clarity, perhaps? Let's just use the clarity slider, bring out a little bit more detail. So now this is what I've got. So I'll take all that, copy and paste that onto a separate layer. Oh, okay, let's just grab that, put that back there. So now on this layer, what we're going to do is we're going to go to, let's go back to our generative fill, and we will select the subject, and then we can select inverse again. And so now we've got that. And now with the generative fill, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put inside a large dark garage with coloured cinematic lights, red, blue, purple, yellow, cutting through thick smoke and reflecting off wet tarmac. And let's see whether that actually puts anything in. So at this point then, so I've given it a whole bunch of instructions, and we'll see, again, no guarantees, but we'll see what it comes up with. Oh, there we go. That's the kind of thing. So it's given us three options, that, or that. Okay. So if I was really going to be photographing some fancy car, this is the kind of setup I would be looking at. Okay. Only in reality, because if it was really there, these lights would also be reflecting off the paintwork. Now, even if you haven't got a big hangar, like I say, if you can find a deserted car park, large piece of tarmac, go out there at night. And if it, ideally after it's been raining, so you've got lovely wet reflections, because these reflections really matter, make a difference. Or if there isn't, if, you know, there's been no rain, you can take some buckets of water, splash it about, make it a bit wet. Smoke or exhaust fumes, lights, nighttime smoke, this is, you know, it's going to be much more a spectacular kind of shot. So if you really want to get inventive, go ahead and do that. I've not had the opportunity to do that. But if you're talking about how do you go about creating something really much more interesting with car photography, that's this. But that's about creating the car photography rather than everything else which I've shown you, which has by and large been about opportunistic. Okay, apart from like the setup ones with the fashion shoot, most of the other stuff I've done has been opportunistic. So I hope that helps. I hope that really gives you an insight into the notion of car photography. So next time you're there and you see some kind of amazing car sitting on the you know, parked on the side of the road or over in the car park, or you're at something, you're going, right, what do I do next? I've got my phone. What can I do with it? You've now got a few more ideas of how you start about it. So can you now translate that into the car photo challenge? Yes. So 2 weeks time, on the 30th of August, we will be having the car photo challenge. So now you've learnt all this, you can go and raid your archives. Now, meanwhile, I will say no AI. Don't go cutting out a Lamborghini or your Honda S2000 or whatever and building, you know, if you're going to, you know, take the photo. If you want to go out at night time and do something dramatic, I will be really, really impressed. More smug points to be won for anybody who's going to go off and go to that amount of trouble to create a photo of the car. You will learn so much if you have a go at doing that. I would seriously recommend it. But for those of you who can't do that, don't want to do that, you might have archives you can raid, you might just go around to, and also there's something to be, can you make something interesting out of an ordinary car? Everything I've shown you has been vintage cars or the Lamborghini or my own car, my Mini. Fun little cool car. But there's something about the photography. What can you make that's interesting? Okay, so try and get your photos to me by no later than Friday the 28th of August, because remember, I still have to put these podcasts together. But go out there and make something interesting. This is a car photo challenge. It's a challenge. What can you do? Not just, oh, it's a picture of a car, but it's a picture of a car that's interesting. There was something about this car that I was interested in. How did I intensify that? How well am I communicating that? Smug points to be 1. What have we got here? Janet says, just want to take a moment to apologise for joking around. Marcy said, wanting to do joking around my default setting. Not a problem. I enjoy a joke. Just sometimes I don't have all the reference points at the point you make them. Always a problem with a joke. Janet says, I was about to go to a local car show, but I see it's been postponed for 2 weeks. Rain forecast in the afternoon. Well, that's a pain. Okay, so where was I? So that's the chance. So next week is a feedback session. So your chance to send me an image, get feedback on a photo. In fact, actually, for that matter, if you're playing around and you've taken a couple of car photos and you want to get some more insights, not that'll be the one, I'm not going to fix the car photo for you that you put in for the following week's challenge, just before you get any ideas. But it's still something to do. If you want to get some ideas, some input, send me your images. Send them to Kim Ayres Gmail, KimAyresPodcast@gmail.com. So that's the place to send all the images for challenges and for feedback. KimAyresPodcast@gmail.com. Okay, to tell me about, if for feedback, tell me what your sticking point is, tell me where, what kind of help you're looking for, and for the challenge, tell me a little bit about the story, what the car is, where you took it, what was it that grabbed you about the image. Right, okay. And meanwhile, if you haven't done so, click a like. Do a little like on the video. It always helps. As I said last week, 300 episodes. You thought we'd have broken through into the big realm. We haven't. Algorithms still only show this to a handful of people. But a like always helps. Right, so I think that's about it. Thank you to everybody who's turned up and left comments and what have you. Thank you to Robert for coming up with the idea. Next week then is the feedback session. Send me your images for that. 2 weeks time, the car photo challenge. Look forward to seeing what you're going to come up with that. Right, take care, have fun. See you next week. Bye bye.